Hi everyone, it's B.Chavez from EvilGSP Sports Performance. I'd like to welcome you back to yet another edition of the EvilGSP Video Blog. And today's edition is going to be kind of a continuation, maybe not so much a part two, but a somewhat of a continuation of the very first video blog, and that was supplements and overview, which, by the way, I'd like to thank everyone. That's crossed 1,000 views, and I know in the world of YouTube sensations and what have you, that's not very good, but in the world of actual information and science and rational thought, 1,000 people viewing my video, I think, is pretty good. It's actually better than any of my original expectations, so I thank everyone very much for that. So, anyway, that video was supplements and overview, in which I kind of broke into the categories that I feel most supplements belong in, and how relevant those categories are to human performance, that sort of thing. And one of the things I mentioned was protein powder and how I really didn't consider it a supplement. I considered it a food, and that one remark generated more response, more communication, dialogue, and genuine hate mail than any other thing I've said. And I stick by it. I completely believe it's an acceptable thought and acceptable way to conduct business. And I wanted to just take a moment and cut this video on protein powder and just kind of talk about it and kind of its role in sports performance and how I view it and how I use it in program design and nutritional design for athletes. And as I said, I really don't see it as a supplement. I see it as a food. Yes, people say, well, I use it to supplement my protein intake. Well, yeah, but somebody else could use shrimp to do that. It's kind of stupid in that regard. Yeah, I guess the language is such that it's a valid statement, but in practical application terms, not so much. Okay. I view a supplement as something you add to a greater thing to make it more complete, more effective, or to generate a drug-like effect, which most people, when they're talking about supplements, that's what they're talking about. Creatine monohydrate gives them a drug-like, measurable, identifiable effect. Just having a scoop of protein powder doesn't do that. It adds 4 calories per gram and a little bit of nitrogen to your diet, but it doesn't have a drug-like response, and certainly one that you couldn't get from a piece of meat, a piece of chicken, something like that. And again, another little armchair rule I use is if it has calories, it's a food. It's not really a supplement. Pretty much stick by that across the board. Get into a little bit of gray area with fatty acids. Some of your specialty fatty acids, of course, have calories because they're fats, but they definitely do have a supplemental effect and even to some degree a drug-like effect. So there is a quasi gray area there. But in general, protein powder. And I before I begin or continue, I don't really want to come off as I'm just bashing protein powder because I'm not. I even have in the past worked for some supplement companies. Worked in the dairy protein research world for a short time. This is not foreign to me. It's not it's not alien to me, and it's even to some degree near and dear to me. But the reality is, protein powders, protein supplements are really not nutritional supplements. They're foods. In many cases, very good foods, high quality protein, very low fat. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But the reality is they're not supplements. They're just very, very convenient, in many cases delicious foods. But if you really sat down and looked at the nutritional component of a simple 25 or 30, 50 gram protein shake and 400 or 500 grams of cottage cheese, you're looking at very, very comparable nutritional profiles. Completely incomparable in price. Cottage cheese is considerably cheaper, fractionally as expensive. It is more perishable. It has some deficits, but in the grand scheme of things, very comparable. And the number one thing people bring to me is, well, what about protein quality? X protein, hydrolyze this thing, or whey protein isolate, or whey protein concentrate, or this, or ion exchange the other thing. And yes, the reality is you are talking about a higher quality protein. Couple points on that, though. First of all, in an arrangement, in a dietary scheme where most strength athletes, bodybuilders and strength athletes exist, which is all of us listening to this, we're already so nitrogen overfed, at least in terms of nutrition. Maybe not in terms of sports performance. There is a difference, as I've pointed out so many times. But in terms of nutrition, you're already so far beyond any health need that the quality of the protein is simply overwhelmed by the volume of protein. Typically, I go into this by way of analogy. And if you consider this, the game of Scrabble, you get these little tiles with letters on them. One letter, there are representations of every letter of the alphabet. So there's 26 letters in different quantities in a bag, and you reach in and get handfuls of them, and you play the game. Nutrition is actually very, very similar to that. Instead of 26 letters represented in the English language, there's 20-something amino acids involved in human nutrition. There's actually hundreds of amino acids. A lot of people fail to recognize there are many, 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 many that are not involved in human nutrition. That is a relevant point, and it comes back to the sports performance thing far down the road. But in general, you have all these amino acids, these letters, and you reach in and get a handful. That's the equivalent of a bite of protein or a serving of protein. Okay. Yes, everyone who's ever played Scrabble knows that certain letters are more valuable. The vowels and R's and S's and T's, which are very commonly used in regular language. Absolutely. The thing is, though, is if you could cheat at the game and just keep getting handfuls of letters, no matter how low quality the handfuls are, sooner or later you would accumulate more than enough vowels and R's and S's and T's and what have you to spell any word you want. That's what happens with human nutrition. Even though protein quality is important, it's far less important than quantity. Okay, so protein quantity overwhelms quality, making these very expensive, very elaborate protein powders really unnecessary. The only time they become necessary is in the obvious arrangement where your protein quantity diminishes. Say in an arrangement of calorie restriction, nitrogen restriction. As you eat less and less and less and less protein, the quality of that protein becomes ever more important. That's almost obvious. The problem is, to most strength athletes, that never happens. To bodybuilders, that only happens for a few months, and in some cases even a few weeks of a year, because most bodybuilders would prefer to consume their protein over carbohydrates and other substrates. So the reality is protein quality is by far the most overblown component of all of this. Again, I'm not preaching against protein powder. I just really feel it's important that you, the athlete, the person, and the consumer understands how you're spending your money and why. I actually, right now, this very moment, have some protein powder, aside, in my kitchen. It's a very convenient, very easy, very digestible, a lot of things food source. It really is. But dollars to donuts, if I have the time, the money, and the effort to spend, I would much rather prefer food. And that is how I coach my athletes, and it is just kind of a fundamental tenet that it's food first, and then anything second. And protein powder and a few other things I fit in a quasi category in between food and supplement, where they're just really convenient, practical foods, but they're not supplements. They're really more to the food side. And when I design a diet, they are listed in the categories of foods and not supplements. So just a quick little kind of a second, like a sub overview of supplements. The overview. Here's the overview of protein powder. We'll certainly talk more in greater detail later. I don't think any of you are going to let me off the hook on this. We're just going to have to keep talking about it until you either all hate me or you all understand at least where I'm coming from on the concept. Protein powder, not a supplement. It is a food. Nothing wrong with it, but it's a very expensive, overly complicated, overcomplicated product and concept. Dollars to donuts. Spend your money on food. If you have any left over, buy some kind of universal blanket protein powder. Don't go crazy with the quality. Go crazy with the convenience, the cost, the effect, your ability to tolerate it. Those sorts of things that will really work better for you in the long run. Food first, everything else second. So there you are, just a little quick talk on protein powder. Until next time, B.Chavez, Evil Genius Sports Performance. Stay strong.